They came screaming from the clouds. That unmistakable wail, the Jericho trumpet, sent entire armies into panic before a single bomb even hit the ground. In the early years of World War II, the Stuka dive bomber became the sound of death itself. Between 1939 and 1941, German Stuka pilots destroyed thousands of tanks, bridges, and convoys across Europe. Their accuracy was terrifying. They could drop a bomb within a few meters of a target while diving almost vertically. To many, these men seemed unstoppable, the spearhead of Blitzkrieg, Germany's new lightning war. But behind that legend was a darker truth. The Stuka scream wasn't just psychological warfare against enemies. It was also a death sentence for the pilots themselves. Their planes were slow, fragile, and nearly suicidal to fly once the skies filled with enemy fighters. Even among their own ranks, Stuka crews were seen as doomed men, daredevils trapped in outdated machines, facing impossible odds. By the war's end, their myth had turned to ashes. Once feared by millions, Stuka pilots found themselves hated by everyone: the Allies, the civilians they bombed, and even the German soldiers who fought beside them. This is the story of the men behind Scream, and how the most feared weapon of the early war became a flying coffin that no one wanted to be part of. The year was 1939. Europe stood on the edge of chaos. Germany, armed with new machines and ruthless ambition, had just invaded Poland. What followed was not the slow grind of trench warfare like in 1914. It was a storm of movement, precision, and terror. This was Blitzkrieg, lightning war, and at its heart screamed the Stuka dive bomber. The Ju-87 Stuka wasn't built for beauty or speed. Its wings were bent like a bird of prey. Its engine howled like a demon. Each one carried a siren bolted to its landing gear, the Jericho trumpet, designed to shred the nerves of anyone below. And it worked. Polish soldiers would freeze, British troops would scatter, and even hardened French defenders would drop their weapons when that shriek echoed overhead. For Germany, the Stuka was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of dominance. For the Allies, it was a nightmare that had to be destroyed. The battlegrounds stretched from the open plains of Poland to the beaches of Dunkirk, from the cold forests of Norway to the burning fields of France. Every dive meant another bridge gone, another retreat forced, another city burning. But victory came with a price. While the Stukas ruled the skies for a moment in history, storm clouds were already forming. New enemies, faster planes, and changing tactics that would soon turn the hunters into the hunted. The stage was set for their rise and their fall. Before the world came to fear the Stuka scream, it began as an experiment, a vision born from one man's obsession with precision. General Wolfram von Richthofen, cousin of the famed Red Baron, believed air power could win wars not by chance, but by control. He and other Luftwaffe strategists shaped a new doctrine. Every bomb must strike a purpose: bridges, tanks, command posts. Not random destruction, but surgical terror. The aircraft that would deliver this vision was the Junkers Ju-87. Its design was brutal in function. Fixed landing gear, gull-shaped wings, a bomb cradle that swung clear of the propeller during a dive. Pilots were trained relentlessly, diving from 4,000 meters straight down at targets no larger than a house. The G-forces blurred their vision, sometimes knocking them out cold. But to the Luftwaffe, that was the price of mastery. By the summer of 1939, squadrons like Sturzkamp Geschwader 77 were ready. They had drilled for months over the flat fields of East Prussia, learning how to fly in perfect formation, dive, bomb, pull out, and climb again. Their commanders promised them they were the elite, the precision blade of Hitler's new war machine. Most of the pilots were in their early 20s. They believed in victory, in technology, in destiny. Few realized how short that destiny would be. The intelligence reports they received before Poland were dangerously optimistic. The enemy's air force, they were told, was outdated. Anti-aircraft defenses? Scattered and weak. But the reality was different. Weather, poor maps, and fierce local resistance turned many missions into chaos. Still, in the days before the first strike, the airfields buzzed with tension and anticipation. Mechanics checked the bombs, wiped the oil from the engines, and painted black crosses on the fuselages. Pilots wrote letters home, hands trembling slightly, though none would admit fear. The night before the invasion, the sky over East Prussia was unnaturally calm. No wind, no stars, only the distant rumble of engines waiting for dawn. At first light, the order crackled over the radios. The Stukas rolled forward, propellers slicing through the mist. Their sirens would soon awaken the world, and history's most terrifying sound was about to begin. At dawn on September 1st, 1939, the sky over Poland filled with wings. From the rising sun came the black silhouettes of the Stukas, hundreds of them, gliding in eerie silence before the engines screamed to full throttle. Then, one by one, they peeled over and plunged. The Jericho trumpets wailed. Soldiers on the ground clutched their helmets and prayed. Bridges, railways, and supply depots vanished in rolling fire. In just minutes, the first act of blitzkrieg had begun. But even for the Stuka crews, the reality was harsher than they'd been promised. Fog and wind cut visibility. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from hidden positions. Polish machine gunners, instead of fleeing, stood their ground, firing blindly into the sky as black shapes roared overhead. Several Stukas never pulled up from their dives. They slammed into the earth, torn apart by their own precision. The invincible image cracked, if only slightly. Still, the early results were devastating. Entire columns of Polish armor were trapped by destroyed bridges, and convoys burned along the Vistula River. For a moment, it looked as though Richthofen's theory had proven unstoppable. Reports flooded back to Berlin. Targets annihilated, enemy retreating, Stukas victorious. But the triumph came with whispers of unease. Pilots reported that the weather over France and Britain would not be so forgiving. New fighter models, the British Spitfire, the French Dewoitine, were faster, more agile. And the Stuka, with its slow climb and fixed landing gear, would be an easy target once real resistance arrived. Even within the Luftwaffe, doubts began to stir. "We are too slow for the war that is coming," one pilot wrote in his diary. "Our enemy will not be frightened forever." As the campaigns in Norway and France loomed, the Stukas were refitted, repainted, and reassured. Their commanders promised that victory was inevitable, that fear itself would win the skies. But beneath the surface, every man in those cockpits could feel it. Something was changing. The easy victories were behind them. The next war zones would not be defenseless plains, but contested air, a place where the hunter could become the hunted in a heartbeat. And soon, that heartbeat would stop. The summer of 1940, the Battle of Britain. For the first time, the Stuka met an enemy that did not run. Over the English Channel, the air was thick with humidity, the smell of fuel and salt hanging like a fog. German convoys moved below, while above them, the Ju-87 circled, black crosses against a blinding sun. Their targets were the British radar stations, ports, and airfields that kept the island nation alive. The plan was simple: crush the RAF, then invade. The first dives began at 7 a.m. The sirens screamed as the Stukas plunged, the sound echoing across the cliffs of Dover like some mechanical banshee. Bombs struck their marks, hangars erupted, runways split apart, fuel depots burned for hours. For a brief moment, it seemed the legend of the Stuka still held. Pilots radioed back in triumph. Target destroyed, returning to base. Then the sky changed. Out of the haze came the Spitfires. Faster, sleeker, deadlier. They didn't chase from behind. They dove from above, out of the sun, guns already firing. The Stukas had no chance. Their fixed landing gear made them slow. Their rear gunners with a single 7.92mm MG might as well have been throwing stones. Bullets tore through the wings. Fuel lines burst, cockpits shattered. One after another, black smoke trails fell toward the sea. "Stuka, 12 o'clock high." The call went out too late. A formation was shredded in seconds. Pilots tried to dive away, their only defense, but once they began the descent, they couldn't maneuver. It was suicide in slow motion. The radio channels filled with screams, static, and silence. I'm hit. I'm burning. I can't. Then nothing. Those who survived the first attacks landed back in France shaking, drenched in sweat. Some couldn't unclench their hands from the controls. One pilot wrote later, "It felt like we were naked in the sky. The English hunted us like animals." By mid-August, Stuka losses were catastrophic, entire squadrons wiped out in days. In one mission over Portland, half of STG-77 never returned. For the first time, even German propaganda couldn't hide the truth. The terror weapon had become a target. The Luftwaffe tried to adapt. They flew under escort, altered tactics, avoided daylight raids. But the damage was done. The Stuka, the symbol of blitzkrieg, was obsolete. Its shriek no longer inspired fear. It invited death. From the ground, British civilians watched burning aircraft fall into the channel, some cheering, some silent. For them, the scream that once heralded death was now a song of defiance, proof that the tide had turned. And in that moment, even the Stuka pilots knew the age of the hunter was over. The sound that once ruled the war had become the echo of its own destruction. By the end of the summer of 1940, the skies over Britain belonged to someone else. The Luftwaffe had lost more than 500 aircraft in just a few weeks, and nearly half of them were Stukas. What had once been Germany's precision blade was now a broken weapon scattered across the Channel and English countryside. Entire Sturzkampf Jeschwader units were pulled from the front. Some were reassigned to the Balkans or North Africa, where the air was thinner, the enemies weaker, but the damage to morale could not be undone. The pilots who survived returned home haunted. Many had flown since Poland. Now, they watched their friends vanish in a fire and sea foam. General Wolfram von Richthofen himself admitted that the Ju-87 had reached its limits. Against a modern air force, it was a relic, but there was no time to mourn. The war machine moved on, always hungry. The Stuka would limp on for years more, converted into tank busters on the Eastern Front, used in desperate low-altitude strikes against Soviet armor. Its howl still echoed over Stalingrad and Kursk, but by then, the fear it inspired had turned inward. The human cost was staggering. Dozens of veteran squadrons decimated, thousands of airmen killed or captured. For every successful dive, another life was spent. And in that grim arithmetic, the myth of invincibility finally died. Germany had lost not only a weapon, but a symbol. The sound that once shattered nations now marked the beginning of its decline. As the smoke cleared from the skies of Britain, one truth became clear. The Stuka's scream would never again signal victory, only the end of an era. Today, the Stuka lives on as a ghost of sound, the rising wail that still chills the spine in old newsreels. Historians call it a symbol of early German dominance, a perfect fusion of engineering and terror. But those who flew it knew another truth. The same sound that broke enemy morale also condemned them to die in burning steel. Its legacy reshaped modern warfare. The Stuka's precision bombing laid the foundation for the close air support tactics still used today, but also proved the limits of fear as a weapon. Once the enemy learned to fight back, no amount of noise or spectacle could guarantee victory. The age of psychological warfare gave way to an age of speed, stealth, and strategy. To this day, the word Stuka evokes both awe and revulsion, a machine that defined the opening chapters of World War II and a reminder of how quickly power turns to vulnerability. When the last of those pilots died, they took with them not just memories of triumph, but the echoes of that scream. The sound of men who learned too late that the terror they unleashed would one day come for them.